Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Seent Movies and Television with Matty and Stephen. I am Stephen. Right over here, we have my boy,
Matty.
hey yo. And we're back with another review for you. And this time, we're going to get into a juicy one, if I do say so myself. So it was a big release weekend this last week, I think it was. We got Prey, we got Rise of TMNT, but we also had a Netflix drop of a highly anticipated series based on one of the most renowned comics ever made, if not the most renowned comic ever made, of which that neither of us have actually read the series.
So true.
However, we're here
We're
to
such pet
review
nerds.
the Sandman for you, babies. We got in there, we pressed play, we loaded it up, we made sure our internet connection was good, we made sure roommates weren't there to bother, or if they were, at least they were watching it with us. I don't know if that's true for either of us. However, we both
I
watched
told him to leave me alone.
Yep. we both we both watched the Mother Truckin' Sandman on Netflix, and we're here to tell you a little bit about it, how we felt about it, how you should feel about it, all of the above, and all of the below, all within the dreaming and within the waking life.
I like what you
This
did
is our
there.
review of Sandman. I'll go ahead and start. Just get some of my thoughts out there at first because I just finished it today. It's fresh in my mind.
Do it.
Absolutely loved this series. Was really surprised by it. I knew it was gonna be good just because of my casual familiarity with the comic series growing up. I used to have a subscription to Wizard magazine, so not a week went by without hearing about some Sandman tidbit. So I was fairly abreast of some of the details of this comic, as well as the show going into the show, but really went in pretty blind for the most part. And so I just have to say that, with that being said, I really loved my entire time watching it. I think a few episodes maybe felt a little slow, but they always had a lot to say, a lot of deep dialogue, a lot of really deep concepts. So, I couldn't binge it all the way through just because I wanted to be fresh for each installment. I was able to watch maybe 2 episodes at a time and feel comfortable with that, just because I didn't want to miss anything or feel like I was exhausted on some of this really deep concepts. I love all the occult stuff. I love anything that has to do with dreams or a dream world. I love the bit of, I don't know what you'd say, social commentary that kind of exists with some of this, with some of what's going on in the show. Not so much like it's a Jordan Peele social commentary, but just like what we think about our own psychology and the way our psychology maps our lives and the way our desires, if you will, and our dreams, if you will, and our destinies, if you will, tend to play out. So that's my piece right off the bat to kick it off. But I'm going to kick it over to Matty. How'd you feel about the Sandman? What do you got just right off the bat here? By the way, this is our non-spoilery bit. We're going to talk about non-spoilers for a little bit, and then we'll get more deeper into spoilers after a little bit for those who still have yet to watch it and would like to watch it. What do you got to say?
I loved it. Loved every second.
Hell,
I agree with Stefan that there was some slow episodes, but I thought it had a lot to say about dreams, desires, all that kind of stuff. I'm a huge fan of Neil Gaiman. One of my favorite books of all time is American Gods.
Oh,
It's very upset. I know, I get it. I should have read The Sandman, but I didn't. Okay,
right.
I love Neverwhere.
We're guilty. Guilty as
Yeah,
charged.
I think he's a phenomenal writer. I think he has lots to say. I think he can write novels. He can do the comics, and yeah, I just was stoked for it. I didn't know, at first I was like, Sandman on Netflix, it felt like more of a Showtime HBO kind of thing, but seeing
Sure.
as the way they handled the American Gods series, it kind of just seemed to go off
Right.
the rails. I was like,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
kind of glad Netflix, because from what I understand with Netflix is if they think they have something good and good creators behind it, they let them do what they need to do.
Yeah.
Hence, like Stranger Things. I don't know if Sandman will be the next Stranger Things. I think it's might be a little heady and not as fun as Stranger Things for some people, but it's great,
Right.
man. It's
It's the
well
adult
written.
Stranger Things.
The acting is
Oh, superb.
it's a masterclass. Yeah,
British people invented acting, by the way, so anytime you have them around, it's going to be pretty good. I don't
yeah.
know of any British actor I think this sucks, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's their craft.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I'm sure there might be one, but
there's probably
he's
one. Yeah.
probably not acting, and he's probably just on the streets yelling at you how
Yeah.
he wants to be an actor in
Drop
England.
my water, if anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely stunning performances, incredible visuals. You know, I mean, from what I know about the art from the Sandman and Wizard magazine, as I've mentioned, always, some stunning visuals back in the 90s. Especially Sandman was part of the Vertigo imprint back in the day, which is a DC imprint, which is more mature, a little bit more artsy comics. They really tread a lot of ground back in the days and touched on a lot of provocative material. So, the Sandman isn't necessarily for the youngins. So viewer discretion is advised. If you've yet to see it and you're just poking your head in here to see what we have to say a little bit about it, like I said, spoiler parts are to come. We'll warn you, don't worry. But really what stuck out to me was the visuals through and through. Just like you would get really, you know, mundane settings at times, like a diner or an office building or somebody's house or somebody's apartment, and it would seem very real, and it would just seem like a TV drama. But then juxtapose that with other scenarios where you're in hell, or you're in the dreaming world, or the dreaming, or these really explicitly fantastical settings and visuals. Just like I found my jaw on the floor many a time watching this show, not to mention the writing and the acting, which I'll get into. I think you had mentioned maybe that first episode being a little tough to swallow at first, getting the context.
I do think the first episode is a little hard to swallow because you spend the episode in a house, basically, for the most part, and you're ready to, you've seen the trailer, these worlds that I'm ready to explore, and I'm in the basement with Morpheus,
Right.
not saying
Morpheus.
anything, and Charles Dance doing what Charles
I
Dance
was just
does
gonna look
the
his name up.
best. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
That
Alien
dude
3.
makes the big bucks for just
Yeah.
portraying evil
Yeah.
bastards. So, just kind of like for those people who haven't seen it yet, an overview of, I think it's a 10 episode series. I mean, what am I even trying to ask here, folks? It's worth your time. If you've not yet even seen it or know nothing about it, that's good. Go into it knowing nothing about it. I think it's on
Yeah.
par with the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones or something, just in terms of the performances and the set pieces and what it has to show you. I guarantee you, if you have no idea about this show, what it has to show you is going to twist you up a little bit in a good way. A lot of meaty topics it throws your way, and it wants you to consider, what it is to be human in a lot of ways. I think that's what Morpheus is here for. Morpheus is the king of dreams, or he in essence
The
he's
Sandman.
the Sandman, the master of the dream world and the dreaming. And there's rules that he has to follow and a purpose that he has by being this. He creates people's dreams and makes sure that they don't run rampant and out of control. He also creates nightmares, because that's something integral to us as humans, our dreams and our nightmares. So he makes sure he plays those like marionettes masterfully. So the premise of this show kicking off as that Charles Dance's character is, because he's on par with, they say he's a contemporary of Aleister Crowley, and he's a ritualistic wizard. And
Yeah.
man, if you're into occult stuff, this has got it all. And it's also quite violent. It's also quite deliciously violent. I know,
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't into that kind of thing, but I am. No, I mean, within contextual violence in film, it's like a pigment. You need it sometimes for your painting. But let's just say, what were some of your favorite things that the show covered, or some of your favorite topics that it touched on, or moments, or that kind of thing?
I really loved how it all came back to how the endless, lack of a better term, the gods, I guess, are there for us to make sure that we have dreams, desires. You find out more of this as you watch the series and who these characters are, and some we haven't met yet. I liked how, because I feel like if you have that much power as like a god, you maybe lose that you're here to serve humanity and make sure
Right.
that everything's in balance. And I love how just we meet Morpheus at a point, and he's a certain way, and everyone that he affects is like, oh, watch out, Morpheus is coming. Don't say anything because he's,
Right, yeah, and then and
and
mind you, this
then
is not the Morpheus played by Lawrence Fishburne
yeah,
of Matrix fame. Some people
same
might be,
movie.
if
Yeah,
you're
I
if
don't know
you're
what you're
if
talking about.
you're if you're that detached from like pop culture and you just have no reference and that's the only Morpheus you know,
Yeah.
just saying, telling you right now, this is not that Morpheus. It's a
Yes.
different Morpheus. And yeah, go ahead, sorry.
But yeah, I just really like his arc, honestly. And
Yeah,
yeah, another standout is Death.
yeah.
She's just so
Oh, she's
lovable.
incredible. She is.
A
Yeah,
weird thing to
so
say
great.
about Death, but it's
Yeah.
so great. And just I love the whole arc of Morpheus and where we end with
Mhm.
him, and
You
just
might even
how
say
could
he learns a little bit about his own
well,
humanity
yeah. I
in
just
a way.
I feel like it could have easily done in anyone else's hands, and if Neil Gaiman wasn't involved, he could easily be such a one-dimensional character, easily,
Sure,
and no
right.
growth, and it could have been a
Yeah.
terrible show. But it just as he grows, you kind of like grow with him, which I think is great. Like you get where he's at when he's contained in the first
Hmm.
episode. You get how he feels when it's just such a relatable show, and everything
Yeah.
they talk about for the most part is life, death, everything
Yeah.
in between, and how hard all that can be, and why
And
we
you,
need dreams, why we need nightmares. And
yeah.
it's just so good.
Yeah,
I
definitely. And
want
you
a
wouldn't
better
think,
phrase to say, but it's just
yeah,
good.
that's true. And you wouldn't
Yeah.
think that, like an eternal being has any more to learn about themselves or the what they call the waking world, or the human world, or
Hmm.
even his own world, the world of the dreaming. Um, So, I mean, we love it. We think it's great, and I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna shift right there. That's the non-spoiler conversation about it. If you've yet to see it, we highly recommend it. It's
Hmm.
absolutely astounding. It's way good, almost too good at times. It's pure magic. So stop this right now. Go check it out and jump back to get more of the spoilers, the deeper essence of what the show is about. We're going to talk about now. We're in spoiler territory. So, without going over every single episode, we'll just kind of do some broad strokes and kind of touch on a
Hmm.
few things. For me, it was a lot of, I mean, I really liked the occult stuff and how it was handled. On one hand, you have Charles Dance, who's like this wizard guy, and he's doing all this crazy stuff. Like when he dropped the feather was so cool because at first that spell in the very first episode, it just seems like some occult shit that actually you'd assume somebody like Crowley's doing, and there's just such a magical moment when that feather hits the ground, and then all of a sudden it levitates, and you're like, oh shit, we're into something totally different,
Yeah.
something totally new. That was one thing for me, as I felt like a lot of what I was seeing, especially because we haven't read the comics, was so original. And
Yeah.
praise be to Neil Gaiman for just having such a mind to come up with such creative and unique elements to things that touch on ourselves or our perception of our own lives and dreams and our thoughts on death and everything. Like a lot of the show plays out like kind of in vignettes, either Morpheus being involved or looking upon, or even totally like he's not in a couple episodes altogether, and they're
Hmm.
just examining certain things about our humanity and the depths of our own psychology and that kind of thing. Um, what who are your favorite? What was like one of your favorite episodes, or what would you say is your favorite episode out of the whole thing?
I mean, I the whole death thing where they're walking or like it
Yeah,
starts in a park and Morpheus is just a sad goth boy we know and love, feeding some
unbelievable.
fucking pigeons, and Death shows up,
Yeah,
and they just have a really great conversation about knowing like she's been doing like as soon as they're like Death has been around forever, right? Like, and so
right.
is dreaming and all of this, but she has a different aspect of like what her job is, because these are like Morpheus's job is to give us dreams and nightmares, and that
Right.
her job is to carry us to the other side, and just how like his job is fairly easy compared to her. She has to go and meet with people, and she
Right. She
shows
has to
you how
engage.
like I love how the episode starts. We're in spoiler territory, so she ends up meeting this guy who kicks a soccer or a football, or in England here, sorry,
Footy.
yeah, over to her, and they have this old conversation. She's cute, he's cute, they're trying, and she's like, she makes a comment that like he will die soon, and you're like, oh, okay, well, she knows. And the joke you laugh at, you're like, oh, haha, she's deaf. Then they
Right.
walk around and they kind of go to old people who've lived these extraordinary lives, to babies who've just been born, and then it
Yeah.
all circles back around to this guy
Powerful.
who ends up dying.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know. I just thought it was
Her
masterfully
whole
done, and just them
her
walking and talk. I don't even,
yeah.
real quick, I just don't know if it was like some of the stuff was done in one take or if it just felt that way.
Hmm.
But I feel like that whole episode could have been done in one take, and it would have been. I think it played out well, and I'm sure there are cuts in it. I just, to me, the way I was taking it in was like there was no
Yeah.
cuts, and I'm just continually watching this because it just felt so real and personal, and like what she was telling Morpheus was stuff to help him with his dreaming, and like how he should go back to his realm and treat people, and it just was so good, man.
Right.
It just was such a great
Absolutely.
episode. um,
And so right now I'm pulling up some of the cast because I want to give credit where credit is due here. So Dream Morpheus is played by an actor named Tom Sturridge. I thought he did amazing
so
embodying
good.
this character, especially considering most of this character I've seen. I've read little dialogue blurbs from comics and pages and stuff pulled out,
Hmm.
but just like how they've translated the art style over to being more contemporary and maintaining this really gothic feel to everything. Like he is the
Hmm.
like ultimate sad boy in a way. Like even though he's his
It's Robert
emotions,
Smith.
he's very stoic, to be fair. I think my favorite episode is probably also the death episode.
I would really like to. I haven't read the comics,
Ah,
but like the Death standalone comics that
yeah,
Neil Gaiman did,
yeah,
I hope
yeah.
they really do like some like Death miniseries or a movie. I think would be really cool to adapt those
That would be
comics.
awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say I think there's such potential for spin-offs and stuff here. They're all
Mhm.
pretty much all the characters in the show are so interesting.
Yeah.
So her name is Kirby Howell Baptiste, who played Death. Absolutely incredible, beautiful, wonderful actress, and just so endearing, so lovable. But Death just is constantly involved in the circle of life, and so she has
Hmm.
a reverence for humanity and an understanding for humanity that she's attempting to impart onto Morpheus, because he can be very staunch in his purpose and his protocols, and the way that things work. And so she, in a way, is trying to tell him, lighten up and open up. So also in this episode, it was a very powerful episode. Lots of good episodes. But also in this episode, we have a whole other thing where they meet this guy at this tavern in like in the mid 1700s or late 1700s or something like that, and he's like, "Fuck death! Death is stupid. I'm never gonna die. I've decided right now I'm not gonna die." And
Yeah.
so Morpheus is intrigued by this and makes kind of like a fun game to play with death. She challenges him to try and seek out a better understanding of humanity and how it might, and he's curious as to how a human might take it, because he's under the impression that it'll be hell after just a shorter amount of time. We're only
Hmm.
meant to live so long, really. But he ends up having every 100 years he meets up with this guy, and they talk about the experience. And there's a lot in this episode that really resonated with me as well, especially with this like character or whatever. Not that
Hmm.
I'm afraid of death or don't want to die or whatever, but there's just a moment where Morpheus is asking him, it's like, so how do you feel about it? Do you still want to go on living? He's like, absolutely. He's like, this is brilliant. He's like, why would anybody ever want to die? And he pointed out that there's chimneys now, and they don't have to breathe in smoke inside of a tavern and choke up, or there's little
Yeah.
pieces of cloth they can blow their nose on instead of their sleeve, kind of speaking to the innovations of man. And he's really reveling in this whole notion of immortality, and he's doing things with it and making mistakes. And I don't know, I just kind of love the whole idea of some esoteric type being conferring and having some type of relationship with another person who's essentially mortal, even though this guy is like technically immortal. He comes
Hmm.
from the mortal world. And so it's a big part of Morpheus's arc. I think it's a huge cornerstone for him throughout the series. So yeah, that episode in particular just had this really nice duality, and it wraps itself up really good. So I would agree. I think that's probably the most poetic, the most profound episode in terms of what it has to lend to us as audience members.
Hmm.
But in the rest of it, the way that the story is told, it has these interesting moments. Like I said, like kind of vignettes. They really focus in on certain aspects and certain themes for each episode. You were saying you had a couple that maybe you were thought were dragging or a little slow, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's one. I think it's like I think it's a great story. I just was like, I'm ready
Yeah.
for Morpheus. I'm ready for the Corinthian. I'm ready for more Lucifer. I'm like, I'm ready for
Yeah.
these
Oh
other
yeah.
characters and stuff. And it's the other character is important in it, and I like him. It's well done. Is the diner scene with totally blanking
Right.
on the
Yeah.
character's name. Um, but that one just
John D. Deal, played by
John D.
John D. played by David Thewlis.
Yeah.
Fantastic British actor. If you've not seen him, you need to watch more movies.
Yeah,
That's that.
I mean, he's great in it. Looking at some of the images from the comic and to comparing to like the actor they chose, I think they couldn't have done any better.
Yeah.
I just felt like, I mean, I get the episode. I get it. It's important. Like if we were left up to our own devices to do whatever we wanted, whenever.
Right.
We're just sometimes it's just we're gonna be primitive, and that's just what happens.
Yeah.
And I love the
So
little I love the experiment. I just was ready to like to me it could have
you're
been
done
30
with that.
minutes and then
Yeah.
the other 20 minutes could have been,
Yeah.
more
There's
Morpheus or
quite
something like that.
Yeah, there's quite a big arc there with John D. I think it's the episode previous where he gets the ruby that creates dreams.
Hmm.
Because so Morpheus is captured by the Aleister Crowley-esque wizard guy because this guy was actually trying to get death. Yeah, his son dies at Gallipoli.
Gallipoli.
In the Battle of
Yeah.
Gallipoli, his son dies, and so he's trying to get his son back, who is his treasure, and it forms a rift between his living son, who's still there, that he treats so awfully.
Yeah.
But in this whole meantime, so we'll jump back to the first episode just a little bit. He captures Morpheus and encases him in this chamber. So you got a naked Morpheus in there after he's captured. And one thing about naked Morpheus I want to mention is that he looked cool naked. I don't know what they had him do. I know for movies, for like that really ripped look, a lot of times they need the actor to get pretty dehydrated. This is what
Hmm.
Hugh Jackman did for Wolverine to be really ripped. So I wonder if that was in play, but he looked, taut and like bony and almost skeletal
Hmm.
in those scenes where he's nude basically. And I just thought that looked cool. I thought the way that they were able to achieve that in his just stark pale skin inside of this
Yeah.
thing, he really looked like if you captured an exotic creature and caged it up,
Hmm.
as opposed to just some actor in this bubble. Um, so Morpheus is captured by this guy, and he was hoping it was death, but now he has dreams, and they're not so certain what to do with that, but they realize it's powerful. At the same time, you have a nightmare who's on the loose called the Corinthian, and he's got
Hmm.
machinations to form the waking world in his own image in a way, and he's a pretty terrifying character. So Boyd Holbrook plays a great villain. You might remember him from Logan. He played the primary antagonist in that film, I believe. God, I haven't
Yeah.
seen Logan in a while. So the young son who's still alive, he inadvertently ends up killing his father in an altercation that they have down there in the basement, and then now he becomes basically the master of Morpheus at that point, and rather than immediately letting him go, mostly because of the fear that Morpheus is wanting some vengeance for being held for at this point quite a while. Um, he he kind of stalls out on Morpheus on what to do about it, and
Hmm.
and also I think takes advantage of maybe his abilities. I'm kind of forgetting if he used Dream much to get what he wanted, but he has a pretty fruitful and nice life, but he just kind of sits on his hands in terms of what to do with Morpheus,
Hmm.
and which I'm sure makes Morpheus more and more angry. Prior to his going into old age, there's a raven that Morpheus has called Jessamy. That moment when there's so many just terribly sad moments in this fucking
Yeah.
show too. So finally, Jessamy is able to get into the house and do something about it, but it's just a raven, and so that there's just such a sad moment when it's like pecking at the glass,
Hmm.
and it's the way they animated this raven is just like you can see the desperation. It's like I want to help you, but I don't know what to do. And then the kid who's still alive, who's now like roughly an adult at that point, blasts the raven, and it's just horrifyingly sad and really puts Morpheus in a place of now what is he going to do? I think I am really going to kill the
Yeah.
fuck out of this kid now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
now it just creates such a great conflict, for right at the beginning, and you get a good sense of Morpheus's temperament and the way that he feels and thinks about things. And I think that kid was right to not immediately let him out, because he probably would have just.
I got a question for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
There's a really great episode where Morpheus has to go to hell, and that whole thing,
I
carrying your
love
own
that.
fire, it's cold in hell. Oh, so
That
good.
was great.
What did
Yeah.
you think about the match that they had? I
So
didn't know how that fight was going to go. I mean, I imagined they weren't going to go to fisticuffs, but
right.
I was. It was so good, dude. Just like, oh, I just loved every second of that.
Yeah.
That's another great episode.
Yeah.
But
Um, you know what I thought of when I watched it after the fact? Because I thought it was such a unique way to portray a battle, but also I was like, this is like Yu-Gi-Oh! Without the cards.
yeah,
It's almost like Pokemon or
I
something,
call
because
you or
they're
whatever.
referring to animals and
Yeah.
stuff. But that's just a stupid thought. That just popped into my head. It's not anything like that. Um, but I really loved the moments in how backtrack a little bit to Patton Oswalt then taking the place of the Raven Jessamy, who had died, and Morpheus has a problem with taking on a new Raven and everything, but Patton Oswalt delivers a wonderful performance as Matthew the Raven, who's
Yeah.
really great, really helps him out throughout the series. But I love, especially that line when they get to hell, that moment, and this is Gaiman. This is Gaiman's right from his mind, right from his whatever, which also, side tangent, David Goyer has a big hand in adapting this, and I have thrown shade at David Goyer pretty much my entire podcast career. This is not our first podcast. I
We've
have
been
talked
around.
shit on David Goyer, but I think at this point, I mean, that show is so good, I don't think that that's necessary anymore. I think all parties involved did a great job. Okay.
Real quick, I think what David Goyer brought to it was probably more excitement, and where maybe some dialogue, like you could just have, for example, going back to that death scene, you could watch a stage play of that, like you could have set them on a bench and had that same conversation. And I
Mm-hmm.
think probably maybe what Goyer brought to it was maybe making it like, okay, so we're gonna have them walk around, we're gonna have them do this. Um, I feel like probably going back to Batman Begins real quick. I
More
think like
organizational.
yeah, well, like I think seeing what like Nolan did with The Dark Knight, and I think Batman Begins for me, I enjoy a little more, even though Dark Knight's a great movie. I think it's because it's comic booky.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
there are some
Definitely.
of those clips where you're like, well, that's not Nolan. He wouldn't write a cheesy line like that, and that's Goyer. And I think Goyer brings that like, hey, let's not forget this is a comic book, and we have to have
Right.
fun sometimes.
Sure.
So I think that's what he brought to Sandman, because this could have been a very drab show. Just
Sure.
so
Really
I
dry.
think
Could have
he
been very British. No, I'm just playing.
I think Goyer is probably like a Hollywood guy, He's like, yeah,
Sure.
I understand what you're doing, Catman, but I think to get in audiences that would not be drawn to this, um,
Yeah.
we need to do this. And I think, as much as you throw shade, and I think we've all thrown equal shade at Goyer
I'm a
through the
hater,
years.
guys.
Yeah, I think that it was probably a little better to have some kind of Hollywood guy
Sure.
who's worked in the industry for a really long time and is, put his name on some big movies. So
Yeah. Which
yeah, I think
also,
it's better for it.
he and Neil Gaiman, I just read prior to filming this episode, that Neil Gaiman, he had a big hand in this. He was part of the development along with Goyer, as well as writing the teleplays with him as well. So it was a good team effort. There's a few writers that were involved and some good directors as well. But back to your question, to answer that, one thing I wanted to mention was Matthew the Raven, when they get to hell, and he's like, I didn't expect hell to be so cold. And it's just like, oh, that was like so cool. Like, so much of this show takes you by surprise, even if you have preconceived notions about what they're about to do or what they're about to enter, because it deals a lot with demons and hell and a little bit with God and good and evil, and just the conceptual nature of the characters of the endless characters. So they're all siblings. But anyway, the duel between Lucifer and Morpheus is fantastic. My entire time in hell was spent much enjoyment in hell for me over here. I like devil stuff. I think it's cool. I think the aesthetic of it all, like heavy metal and shit like that, it's like really great. So anytime I see in a movie where they're like a depiction of hell, it's always pretty interesting, especially when it's done as well as it's done here.
Yeah.
So we have Gwendolyn Christie playing Lucifer, who I think is just just this unique and stunning beauty in her own right. I love Gwendolyn
Hmm.
Christie, statuesque, and just she is. There's nobody else like her, I think, and she's a fantastic actress. And to have her play Lucifer and those delicious leathery wings, man, this looked fucking cool. But the duel itself was just really great, where it was like it was a battle of concepts and a battle of themes, and it was almost like rock paper scissors in a way. But
Yeah.
you had more trump cards each time, and the themes that they're addressing as they're fighting are so integral, like primordial to what we understand in nature. And there's a lot of predator prey here stuff. I know we talked about predator prey stuff when we reviewed Prey. So the duel itself was really great. I've never seen anything like that, and seeing them get hurt based on concepts thrown back and forth is like, I can imagine like the power of demons and the power of gods. They don't really necessarily need to physically harm one another. They're, for the better part of their existence, eternal and probably unharmable. But there was, it's the logic that became powerful. And I
Yes.
love how she addressed the anti-life, the notion of
Yeah.
the opposite of light and good and life. But it was fantastic. I hope I answered your question adequately.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
It was
Great
great. I loved
answer.
Hal. I love all the demons. I'm glad he got his helm back. So like his tools that he needs to maintain the dreaming and maintain the structure of things are taken from him. So the first few episodes are him tracking down
Hmm.
his tools.
Well, I love that. Like, so when he goes for his bag of sand, there's a character that's introduced that has been gender swapped, and I'll definitely get your opinion on that because I think it would have been very fun to see John Constantine or Constantine show up, but we get
Mm-hmm.
gender swapped to Joanna
For sure.
Constantine. And I love the actress that plays Joanna, and I think she did
Yeah, she's
wonderfully.
awesome.
But I love that these tools that humans have, like the bag of sand, there
Yeah.
are repercussions for owning the things of gods or other
Sure.
beings.
Right.
And I
Absolutely.
just, I love when the reveal happens of what the sand has done. I mean, I know we're in spoiler territory, but I just don't want to spoil certain things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So I love that like he did something to help her to maybe help her find comfort. And when you get the reveal, it's just I don't know, it just drained me, man. I was just like,
Right.
yeah, we should not have these things as humans. Other
Yeah. I
beings
love,
need to wield these things, and I
the
love
Ruby
that.
is harming you, John D. I loved
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I like that. Even though it takes a while for Morpheus to come around to kind of caring for humans, he knows a responsibility that he has to these beings to
Hmm.
not allow them these kind of things.
And that's one of the things I love too about it is that he has to remind his brothers and sisters that it's not we're not you have these powers, but they're not for you to play with. They're
Yeah.
for us to keep balance for humans and make sure
Right.
that humans
Yeah.
can dream and have desires and do these things. And I love that it's like, I mean, I think it's just the same with like all mythology is,
Yeah.
God's tampering with humans when they shouldn't. They should leave it all alone because
Hmm.
it creates one thing that creates another thing that causes, tragedy, which, it's drama, baby. We're all there for it,
Yeah,
you know?
which is what I love about Neil Gaiman. A lot of his stories have to do with the notion of folkloric characters,
Hmm.
mythological characters, intermingling with modern day people, and maybe not even necessarily modern day, but just how because in real life, whatever your beliefs may be, it's quite hard, near impossible, depending on who you are, to commune with any kind of God
Hmm.
in this actual reality that we live in. So to see stories like this where humans are having such miraculous interactions with these strange, beautiful, and terrifying beings is just something that just gets my imagination going. American Gods. Please read that book. Please read that book. Neverwhere. Anything Gaiman's touch. He really has such a wonderful mind and is such an encyclopedic knowledge for mythological concepts and characters. It's his bread and
Hmm.
butter, baby. And so you get a story like this, you just have these wonderful moments of things that we necessarily can't necessarily touch ourselves or reach ourselves, which is why we have stories like
Hmm.
this. And back to the John Constantine thing, it seems they did the gender swap for that character because John Constantine is an integral character to the whole mythos, which actually I think both Maddie and I are going to jump on these comics toot sweet after
Yeah,
the show,
I mean,
just to
we've we
make it all
failed
make
you all
sense.
as podcasters and nerds, honestly. I mean,
Yeah, this is
maybe
movies
we
and
should have stopped
television.
the review,
We
do it
also
again.
like comics. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I thought she was fantastic, and in the episode that she gets introduced in, it's great to see. You always have those characters that are kind of like the wild card, full of attitude or whatever. She's just down to brass tacks. She does what she needs to, almost just does what she wants. I love when she's like, "I tripled my fee," and then
Yeah.
she summon or the demon that is summoned, and the violent way that he just rips out of this football
Dude.
player.
Yeah.
It was so good, and then the interaction with Morpheus and the demon, and how important it was not to send him straight back to hell, but Joanna Constantine being like, "I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want to do," boom, and so it seems like
Well,
from the
that's
moment she exited in that episode, sorry, that
go ahead.
there's more to be seen, and hopefully we do get a second season of this show. I would be kind of sad if we didn't, because I would love to see more of her. I also liked that he was like, "Constantine, I've known your family for thousands of years," or whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
also the pronunciation of it, I think, looking back at the Keanu Reeves Constantine movie, I think most people who would reference, that movie would be like, it's Constantine, and we know it is Constantine. And that's been the way it's been pronounced for American audiences for very long, and probably if you read the comics, that's, as an American, how you would pronounce it. So I enjoyed the fact that they were saying Constantine, and maybe differentiating away from that a little bit, also with the
Yeah.
gender swap. So I enjoyed that quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of her. And in the death episode, you see one of her ancestors, which is quite good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have another
Yeah.
question. What was your what like? I mean, I know we've talked about favorite moments, but I feel like there were a lot of heartbreaking ones. I have one in
Okay.
particular
Oh.
that kind of hit me pretty early on. I was wondering what yours was, if you had a heartbreaking moment
So
or something that happens that you're just like, man, this is. I'm not. I don't know if I like. There were moments where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this show. If this is how we're starting, and the one I'm thinking
so
about starts pretty early on.
yeah, I think so. It might be the same moment, and maybe the most sad moment. But so I mentioned the Jessamy dying, getting blasted, and how desperate she looked trying to get him, pecking her way out of that bubble or whatever. But actually, I think the most heart wrenching scene of all is the scene with Gregory the gargoyle.
Oh my god.
This
This
so
is why we
Gregory
have a
the
podcast together, people.
yeah. So Gregory the gargoyle is being caretook of by
Cain
Cain
and
and Abel, the characters
Yeah.
Cain and Abel, which is really fun. Like Cain endlessly kills Abel, and they're resurrected, and they have to
Yeah.
do it over and over and over again. Which
Yeah.
I love that shit. So good. By the way, side tangent: read a comic book called The Goddamned if you're not privy.
So good.
Really good. But
We
anyway,
do
back
read
to
some comics, okay? Just not this
back to
really
the show.
important one that's been
Um,
around forever.
So the whole thing with Gregory, and I know we're in talking kind of spoilery territory, but I'd really like for people to go into the scene fresh for the most part. But Morpheus he knows he has to utilize Gregory in a way that is not so happy, we'll say. But just the emotion from the CG animated gargoyle is, I'm a dog person, and Gregory exhibited a lot of, kind of dog behaviors and stuff like that. So when we get to the scene with Gregory, and this is what's fucked up about filmmaking, people, is there's clearly psychological manipulation at play here in order to get the emotions that they want. And they played my ass like a fiddle with this scene. And this
Same.
poor little Gregory, we'll just stop there. But I'd say, to answer your question, that was like the most heart-wrenching thing. There is somewhat of a happy moment after that.
Yeah.
Or resolve, if you will, a better resolution to that. Not all is lost, but poor Gregory must give of himself willingly. And the animation in that gargoyle, just its understanding of what Morpheus has to do and how it needs to utilize him, was just like too good and just too heartbreaking.
Oh, so good.
For sure. Was that your same
Yeah.
scene as well?
Yeah, dude, it got me. I
Damn.
think that and some of the Vortex stuff, which I don't want to give too
Yeah.
much away.
That was good.
That some of the Vortex stuff of just being not knowing what you are, but knowing that you have to die to basically save the Earth, even though you have no control. It just that was also just like, and her like the Vortex's whole story of her brother and her, and like And then like the sleeping how I just loved how I felt like I was like sometimes watching different stories. I'm like, how does this all come together? And Neil and the writers were like, just wait, Maddie, it's all gonna it's all
Right.
gonna come
It's all
together,
going
and
to
you're
come
gonna. And
together.
I thought it
It
all
does,
came together so well. And
because there's a part in maybe like episodes through episode 8, 7 and 8, I feel like it almost feels like it's kind of unraveling, or they're going too
Mhm,
far off of where the track was. Like, wait, where were we headed, what was going on? But it really
mhm,
does. In that last episode, everything kind of clicks and comes right back together. And that's true for most of the series, I would say. That it allows itself to expand out and examine certain things and examine these characters and their scenarios. Back to that diner episode, that one I actually really enjoyed, and I was like consistently like, oh my god, that's fucked up, that's fucked up. But it's like that thing where you just, where you wish you could say or do things that are on your mind and really tap into just like that reptile brain of like, this is how it should be, this is what I want, and this is how it needs to go. And the point of that story was to subvert the expectation of the audience
mhm,
at each turn. And David Thewlis's character John D being at the control center with the dream ruby. Like, basically he's just allowing people to be what he believes they truly are, and actually what kind of ends up seeming like, yeah, they truly are like this, but without the dreams and desires, and without this order to the fabric of these realities. There is so much lost. So the whole thing with Morpheus is that he's, when he's captured, it unravels the dreaming and it sets the events in motion, but everything is completely out of control, and he must get everything back into order. So that's kind of like the main kind of basic arc. But for Morpheus himself, it's really about learning more about how his purpose is integral to the whole of humanity. And and it makes you think after you watch the whole show that, like, it makes you think about your own humanity, and like what it is that you desire, and what it is how you would be without your ethical or moral beliefs. And why is it that we do the things that we do, or why is it that we have the dreams that we have? Because the Corinthian, he puts together this entire cult of people who are reveling in the very, just the pure joy of killing for killing's sake.
mhm.
That's what we do. And he makes an art of it, his own art of it. And so there's so much in this show about us, basically. And these characters are the fantastical tools that we get to kind of recognize that. So I think the show in of itself has a lot for everybody to chew on. And it'd be a shame for you to miss it, honestly. Like, in the age of streaming where we get so much, this is one of those things I think that is just like really special. And it would be sad if we didn't get a second season. I think it's in the top 10 right now, so I think it's likely we'll get a second season.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that the WB movie people and the WB television people are two
Oh,
separate
right.
entities, and
Oh, right.
television just doing what it wants to do and not following what
Mm-hmm.
is happening with WB movies right now. Like, so weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the other thing too is, I think it's one of the best written shows in a long time in terms of dialogue and everything, which I think is very much a testament to Neil Gaiman's, the way that he sees his characters talking, the way he's designed them to talk, and gives them such life. Like, I don't think there's a character in this that is two dimensional. Everybody has wants and needs. I mean, it's very much about that. And screenwriting 101 is like, establish your character's wants. With those desires, conflict is created.
Mhm.
And in fact, now that I think about it, this show is the best, probably, screenwriting class that anyone could get, because it plays on exactly what makes character work, in my opinion. I didn't take my allergy pill today, folks. So yeah, I mean, we both really love this show. I think it's I think it's got a lot more to say. I really hope for that next season.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
yeah, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we went out? There's more to come from Lucifer, it seems like, and Hell. it seems like the stage is set for like the next arc. Basically, I think this show covers the first arc from the first book, like the first 2 trades or something like that, the first 12 issues, as
And
well
there's
as
a
I
lot
think
of
the
those
diner.
trades.
Yeah, I think the diner episode is like one of those standalone issues within the Sandman universe. So what I also hope is, like we touched on before, is that maybe there's some spin-off potential here. It would be, it would be great to see Keanu Reeves do a second Constantine. It would be great to get Constantine in something else, maybe as John. It'd be fantastic to see Joanna Constantine get her own thing, or maybe even just a couple of her own episodes, really, because there's a lot there. There's something great about characters who are human and have such a good knowledge of the occult, and they have ability there, and they stand, like she stood toe to toe with Morpheus without, not necessarily toe to toe. I think he would obliterate her if he had to, but her attitude towards it is just like, I know some shit. And I love characters like that. So love it. Love the dark shit. But I also personally, one thing I really like about this, because it has all the occult stuff in it, is how beautifully it portrays some of the darker elements, like death and the human nature, I guess, and how so episodely we can go from being what we think is a good person to being possibly a bad person, or like the episode with the dude who wants to be immortal and everything. Like, he makes a lot of really shady moves, but by the end of it, you're like, I was thinking, so the whole thing is like he says he decides that he and Morpheus are friends. And Morpheus has a problem with this, because Morpheus is beyond all that. He has no need for companionship. He doesn't care. But that was a very good emotional moment, because like me and Matty are good friends, and I was like, man, that shit is important, to have a good bud. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, come on, Morpheus, man, you like be a pal, dude. Like, that guy's not that bad, he's pretty good. And just the notion of that long-lasting friendship and how they relate to one another, being that they're not just man and endless, or man and God. It's the essence of what makes one anything, I guess, is kind of what I took off of that. And if we were just balls of light in the afterlife or back to the void or whatever, we'd probably still be like, hey, you remember the Predator?
I love when they met, because it wasn't about getting into like catching up. Necessarily, it was they could jump into the conversation, and I just resonated a lot with that.
Bring it in. Come on.
Miss
you. Yeah. It's hugely important, and the show paints a good picture of that. It makes you really, hits you right in the feels, and for one thing, you want Morpheus to grow in that way, and you're just like, damn, why you gotta be so stubborn? And I think to myself, like, at what points am I like stubborn like that, and where do I need work? So any good show or movie is going to reflect back onto you and hopefully help you grow. Movies in themselves are good friends too.
Yes, it's true.
I think. I think we've covered a lot of good ground here. If you can't tell, we love it. As we've mentioned a few times, watch Sandman. Please leave some of your own comments in the comments of this video on YouTube, and let us know what you think about Sandman, if you've watched it already. If you haven't, why not? Like all YouTube videos, subscribe if you want to see more of us. Like this video, it'll help us out. And hit the bell notification to get notifications or whatever. I'm not the type of person to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. If you like this, you know where to come. If you'd like to contact us on Instagram, we're at Seent Movies TV on Instagram. Go give us a follow. Engage with us there in the comments. That is the episode of Seent for this week. You all take care. Be good to each other. Check your desires. And have good dreams. Love ya.
Bye.